Hello and welcome to another episode of the RevRx podcast, where we discuss how to thrive in faith, family, and health. My name is Chad Potts, and I'm your host. In today's episode, I'm excited to delve into the world of emotional intelligence, emotional regulation, and emotional sobriety. Now, you may be thinking, I don't really know what those words mean. Maybe you're not familiar with those terms, and that's okay, because I've got special guest, Dr. Andrea Vitz, with me today. And we're going to discuss things on a basic level to really help us understand our emotions and why it's important to really regulate them and to be aware of them. Here's what we found in science and biochemistry. The emotions that we feel and that we act out of are the consequence of chemicals, neurotransmitters in our brain and in our body. And a lot of times we act under the influence of those emotions. In other words, if someone says, be on your best behavior, what are the ways that you would need to change in order to be on your best behavior? Well, those are the things we're talking about. It's those ways that we typically act out of our emotions. We act under the control of these chemicals within our body, and then we aren't really our best self. So Dr. Vitz is going to help us really get to the root of some of those problems. She's going to be talking to us today about how to thrive in life, how to really step into your best self, and how to keep your emotions from getting in the way of you being the best mom, dad, husband, wife, coworker, person that you could be. Let's put it this way. What did God create you to be? He didn't create you to be grumpy. He didn't create you to be on edge all the time. And what we're learning is that by being aware of some of these triggers in our life, by being aware of how we're operating under the influence of these chemicals, we can then begin to make changes. And some of these are even generational patterns that we can break, and we can say, you know what? Yeah, that runs in my family, but it stops with me. You're going to hear about Andrea's story. You're going to hear about the work that she's doing in the world and that so many people are benefiting from. And I can't wait for you to hear what she has to say today. So without further ado, I introduce to you my friend, Dr. Andrea Vitz. Thank you so much, Dr. V. Andrea, for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This is so great. Your podcast is wonderful. I love what you're doing, and I'm honored to be here.
Thanks so much. So one of the things that drew me to you is that we do come from a similar place. We have medical backgrounds, and we see the human body in a certain way, but then we also have this desire to really help people holistically. So what you see on the outside is not always the entire problem. Matter of fact, usually it's not. It affects people in all of their lives. And so I'd just love to hear your story, how you were motivated to become a chiropractor, how that ventured into the level-headed doc space that you're in, and ultimately into the emotional sobriety space.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. So I became a chiropractor because I've always been called to heal. And so I think when I became a chiropractor, it just resonated with me so strongly to extract the cause of the pain or the dysfunction and actually have command over that. It was such a powerful, empowering thing. And then that kind of led into me also becoming a strength coach. I suffered from my own spinal injury, and that's how I was referred to my now husband, who rehabilitated me to be becoming a national champion powerlifter instead of being in a wheelchair. So, there's always a choice in the road or a fork in the road that you can take in life. And so I wanted to be kind of a pioneer or a guide for people who could take them where they believed they could never go because of their physical injury, because of their hopelessness, because of their emotional insobriety is what I call it, because of their relationships failing, whatever it was. And so like you, Chad, seeing people all the time suffering and kind of knowing that there's something deeper that we need to be hitting. I think we've talked about, at Lifted Academy, which is my school that my husband and I run, we talk about the 4 planes of existence. And you spoke to me about this earlier, Chad. It's like, yeah, it's not just the physical. The physical is like the easiest, the last thing. My husband always says, our body's the embodiment of our thoughts, emotions, and experiences.
That's good. Yeah.
Right. So by the time you're standing in front of your pharmacist or your chiropractor, your medical doctor, you've already gone through a litany of things that were the cause. You're not sick because of a lack of medication. You're sick because of something that happened. That medication is just helping you right now because you're suffering so much. Right. And so I love that. So that's really how I got into the emotional sobriety, was seeing it in everybody else. But not only that, it's seeing it in myself. You know, I was extremely hysterical, jealous, dishonest, defensive, childish, you name it. Like my behaviors were out of control. And I like to joke around, but I'm kind of not. Like I was a nightmare. And and I recognize though that I didn't notice it because everyone around me was kind of in the same boat. We all didn't know how to optimize our emotional state or our mental patterns. We didn't know how to be emotionally sober. And so I really went out and just made that my mission. I'm like, I'm going to figure out how to make me all the way clear, all the way level headed. I don't even want to feel these feelings because they never lead to anything better. You know,
Right.
just like you've never gotten drunk on alcohol and it made your day better. It's never happened.
Right.
Like
Right.
you're only going to make a mistake when you're intoxicated. And it's the same with emotions. I think
Yeah.
I found out early on, I'm like, not only I know I'm a doctor, it's like, I should know this, how to fix this, but emotions are chemicals.
Yeah.
And the same way you get drunk on any other chemical, you get drunk on your emotions. And here's the
Right.
big part. You actually get addicted to them.
Mm.
So I recognized, because of my past experiences, whether they be traumatic or just an impression, I was making these emotions or these chemicals, if you want to be objective about it, over and over and over. I was so practiced at making them that I would make them without having a new event have to make them. So, for example, if my emotional addiction was fear, I could find fear anywhere
Wow.
because I'm looking through the glasses of, oh, I'm going to be hurt, or I'm going to be in trouble, or I'm unsafe, or you name it. We all have a different kind of belief that comes from our traumatic experiences or from our past experiences that we've learned as children as truth. And
Mm.
the thing about that is, when you're a child, you have no wisdom, you have no experience, and you have no way to resolve anything that could maybe bring some kind of a resolution or acceptance to a situation. So you just like store it in your head as like, this is about me. This is about me. You know, my dad doing that is about me. My mom saying that's about me. And I'm going to carry that with me until I have my own kids. And
Yep.
look at that. Like we're always just kind of shifting our dis-ease or our emotional insobriety being so contagious. We shifted on to the next generation. So my mission is really to bring emotional sobriety to millions of people so that
Good.
they don't make that emotion in the first place by doing real work to change it.
Wow. And that's much needed. That's not something that we are really taught. You mentioned that, kids don't have the capacity to really deal with that. I'm not sure many adults naturally do either.
No.
And that's why we need guys like you, who have done the hard work themselves, who understand, on a molecular level, this is what's needed in order for us to be able to thrive in life.
Yeah.
But yeah, our emotion, we're not really taught how to regulate our emotions. We're not
I
really
love
taught
that.
the science behind our emotions.
Yeah.
Um, and so we just think emotions happen to us and we're just, it's just the way that I am. But
Yeah.
you give us hope because you really kind of come in and say, well, there's things we can do because you're right. They're chemicals. They're neurotransmitters. The different brain chemicals react in different ways. And hey, that's why we feel this way. And it's just fascinating to me. I love brain science. I love, everything that you're doing there. And so I wanted to go back just a little bit though, because I'm really drawn to the story of you being in a wheelchair and then becoming, just a world records holder. Tell us about that. That you kind
Sure.
of mentioned it in passing, but and I remember reading that in your bio, and I'm like, all right, yeah, let's hash that out a little bit. What's that look like?
Yeah.
Um,
Great.
what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I ruptured 3 discs in my spine, my lower back, and I had, almost no use of my calf and my glute on that left side, or my buttock on that left side. it was like 10 out of 10 pain, nerve pain going down my leg. And I was miserable. And I wasn't actually in a wheelchair, but I feel like that was like my future if I didn't get help. And I didn't want surgery. It was so weird. I think if as a doc, like any other patient had come to me at that time, I'd be like, you need surgery right now. Like I'm not a huge pro surgery doc, but I would have been like, you've got saddle anesthesia, you are losing bladder control, et cetera. Like that's a medical emergency. You need it. But for me, for some reason, I just didn't do it. I think there was some other conditions that included like not wanting to take any more time off work or having a mortgage, et cetera. So you name it. But I actually, when I was introduced to my husband, he just said, every problem has a solution. And if you truly have a ruptured spine, that means that this started years ago. This wasn't something that just suddenly happened to you. You weren't in a car accident, for example. And so there has to be a weak point there. There's got to be a trauma there. There's got to be an emotional or energetic or, spiritual denial there. There has to be just muscular weakness, just like avoidance of the area altogether that would make it just fail like that. Because it's never us that, it's never our bodies that fail us. It's us that fail our bodies, And so he really like lit me up with that. And I'm like, you know what? I want to do this without surgery. And I think we can do it together. And so we figured it out. And I'm telling you, I didn't start squatting. I started, laying on an inversion table at like 10 degrees just to get some kind of movement in there. And it was hard. And so he trained me. He's a brilliant trainer. If I could overcome this huge piece of resistance, this thing that was going to take me from, getting I got my doctorate when I was 23. I've done big things in my life, but if I could overcome this big of a leap here, I could do anything by utilizing the same methods. And so we just figured out how to do that for everything. And
a lot of times people in that shape would say, well, this is just the hand I was dealt. It's just the way I am. This is how it's going to be. You didn't accept that.
Oh no. Yeah.
And I love that because, hey, you're bringing hope again. What was that thought process like? Were you ever tempted to just say, well, I guess this is my future? Or were you from the get-go, were you like, no, I'm not going to accept this?
Yeah, not going to accept it. I was frustrated that it took so long for me to find a solution.
Yeah.
But so long compared to what?
Yeah.
We put so much of our own value or our own opinion on things, and it's just like there's no faith there.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just kept standing up and saying like, no, I'm not going to let this take me down. I did have thoughts of fear around it, like, oh no, what if I'm wrong? Right. But, very quickly I recognized, no, like this is going to be fixed by my own hand. Like I know that if there's a structural problem, there's a structural solution. And I also know if there's an emotional component, then I need to do the emotional work and I need to figure all this out. And it's so empowering as a person. But I want to talk to you about what you said that I found was so cool. You said, we're not taught emotional sobriety or emotional fluency as children.
Right.
And it seems like we're not any better as adults. And why would that be? It's because guess what happens? We're kids. We don't learn something and our meat keeps growing. Mm-hmm. So we're just still kids, emotionally speaking, in terms of our ability to navigate them, process them, understand them, and not make them in the first place. So I always tell my parents, it's like, if you want to teach your kids what you never learned, you need to learn it.
Yeah, you can't teach what you don't know.
Yeah, you can't say, listen, do it this way, do it this way. I wish I had done it that way. You got to learn it first.
Yeah.
And be that example. Yeah.
That's powerful. And so, that wasn't the purpose of our conversation today, but I couldn't go any further without saying, let's talk about that because that's incredible.
Yeah, you have to just have relentless hope and relentless action.
Sure.
Yeah.
The mindset shift that needs to happen there is important. I guess what I'm saying is that oftentimes we are the rate limiting step. Our mindset is the rate limiting step. It's not our bodies. It's not, any of these physical things, but it's up here a lot. Yeah. And I see it all the time. And that's one of the things I'm hoping to do is to bring hope to people and show you what is possible.
Thanks. Yeah.
But it it does take doing the work.
It does.
So jumping from there into a little bit of the emotional sobriety. For someone that's not familiar with the term, can you kind of describe that for us, define that for us, and then kind of take us into, what does this normally manifest itself as?
Yeah. Well, it's really about just first you have to look at your behaviors, and you have to maybe even ask other people, like who am I at my worst? Like, what do you see? Am I avoidant? Am I childish? Am I throwing tantrums? Am I drinking too much? Am I consuming food excessively to try to cover something up? Am I being dishonest? Am I getting defensive? Am I snapping? Right? What am I doing that is, for lack of a better term, not on my best behavior?
Yeah, right.
Because when you see the behavior, then you can reverse engineer that and be like, okay, well, when I did that, what was I hoping to accomplish? Check your motive. What was I hoping to accomplish? And you'll find if it's not coming from a place of genuine love or level-headedness, then it was your intoxicated identity. You were under the influence of your emotions when that happened. And so you can reverse that. So for example, if I snap at my husband or something, I could ask myself, well, why did I snap at him? What was I hoping to accomplish? Well, I wanted him to feel shame. Well, why? Well, because he made me feel unimportant. I'm not taking responsibility for my emotions in that moment.
Yeah.
But I want you to understand, like, why was he able to make me feel unimportant? Well, because I have a belief that I'm unimportant, right, Chad? Like, if you didn't believe that you were unimportant, you wouldn't be emotionally triggered by it. Like,
Correct.
if I said, you know what, Chad, you're a pineapple. It's like, you're not going to be crying in your pillow about that, right? You're going to be totally level-headed and chill about it. But if I said, you're just not good enough, it might hit something, right?
Yeah.
And so I just wanted everybody to understand that if you do get emotionally triggered because of something that someone says to you or something that happens, you're actually 100% believing it.
Yeah. It comes from somewhere. If we're not going to be defensive about something that we're not, that we're not relating to, I don't feel the need to talk to you about the reasons why I'm not a pineapple.
Right. You don't feel like this, you're going to chase me down the hall and like explain yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. How dare you? But because I don't struggle with that.
Right.
But yet when you tell me, you know what, you're not good enough. Or even if you say things that make me, and this is what happens a lot of times, I think, you say things that make me feel like I'm not good enough. You probably never say that. The thing I'm struggling with is that I don't think I'm good enough. And so any evidence that I begin to see that you're thinking those things too is going to make me come to the defense of myself.
100%, Chad. You could just come teach this with me, because that is exactly what I'm talking about. The people that get triggered don't recognize that belief has been with you since you were probably 3.
Yes.
And so what's going to happen when that belief hits you, you're going to act like you're 3 because you've never evolved past that.
I love that. You've never evolved past that. You're still a kid emotionally.
Totally.
And that's not from a place of shame or judgment. That's from a place of, we've got to take ownership of that. If we're going to get better, we've got to realize that it's a problem.
Right.
So from the pastoral side of things, when I'm counseling people, I'm counseling couples, say, I come across this all the time.
Yeah. You know why?
Why is that?
Because we're all the same.
Yeah, right. It's a common problem.
Because it's very common.
You're common. But it's something that unless we call it what it is, and there's power in calling it what it is, and until we realize that, we just think, well, isn't everybody like this? Well, yeah, but that doesn't make it okay.
Right. Just because it's common doesn't mean it's healthy. And so there's a couple things. I really want to answer your question, like, what is emotional sobriety? What is its opposite? And how do we know we're unsober? So hopefully by this time, you'll know if you're unsober, you're going to notice that you're fighting in relationships, you have anxiety or severe depression, you're having trouble communicating with people at work, Or, something like if your boss says, "Hey, I need to talk to you," you freak out because you think you're going to get in trouble about something. These
Yeah.
are all mechanisms that are the same in every single one of us. So no shame, like you said, Chad.
Yeah.
That's how you know you're struggling with it. Okay. Any of those things are going to point to, okay, yeah, there's something we can fix. So
Right.
emotional sobriety is to no longer make the chemicals that intoxicate you.
Mm.
That's why I use the word sobriety. Now, I thought that I created the words emotional sobriety, but apparently emotional sobriety has been a part of AA,
Oh,
Alcoholics Anonymous, in the 12-step program as like the next step. But
okay.
it never had really been transformed, or it had never been created. And
Yeah.
so I feel like maybe that was my calling. Like I
Mhm.
think that sometimes when I read about what the original founders of AA said about emotional sobriety, I'm like, this is exactly what I teach, but I teach it so in depth in a way
Yeah.
that's not out there yet. And so I feel super grateful that I was just given that calling. But so emotional sobriety is actually just not having the same response chemically
Mm.
that you normally had. It's almost like not going out and buying the booze in the first place. You're going to
Right.
stay more sober. You're not even making the chemicals, so you're not going to be intoxicated. And how we do that is being rid of all the beliefs and the filters through which we look at the world that create those chemicals in the first place. And therefore, the behaviors will be just gone. They're taken care of.
Yeah.
Because when you're drunk, you behave in ways you'd never consciously choose. And it's the same when you're emotionally belligerent.
Yeah.
Okay. And so this can be on a scale too. Like you might be extremely successful in so many areas and still not know how to be nice to your wife or get along with your husband or be
Sure.
cool with your kids
Yeah.
or open up about something, right? Or maybe you still come home every night like, thank God there's cake at home.
Mm.
Or I'm just going to sit down and just binge watch Netflix. Those are more subtle, right?
Yeah.
Because they're very common in the experience. You're not going to call a friend and be like, "Oh, me and my husband got in a huge fight." And they're not going to say something like, "Oh, wow, I think you guys just have some maybe emotional insobriety that you could totally train through." They're going to say, "Oh, what a jerk."
Yeah. Right. And a lot of times we feel justified, don't we?
Yeah, of course.
Whenever we become emotionally unstable like that, we're like, well, I mean, yeah, I'm like this because they said this or they did that. It's always someone else's fault.
Yeah.
And the more I do this, the more conversations I have, the more that I realize like we've got to really be self-aware and intentional if we're going to be our best selves.
So true.
This whole victim mentality of it's always someone else's fault isn't going to help us thrive. It isn't going to help us live in an abundant way. It's going to keep us trapped where we are. And I've lived that for a lot of my life. It's only in the last several years that I've been able to say, you know what, that is the way that I am, but I don't have to stay that way. And I love that our conversation started that way with you going from, wheelchair to champion, because okay, just like you set your mind to the fact that I'm not going to accept my limitation physically, we don't have to accept our limitation emotionally.
No.
There are ways we can move past that. And so that's the message of hope that you bring.
I love what you just clearly identified. And that is when we stay in victimhood, we make more victims.
Right.
I want to repeat that because it's super important for everyone to understand. When you're a victim, that means you're in an emotionally unsober state. Okay. If you're in an emotionally unsober state, you're intoxicated, whether it
Yeah.
be anger or embarrassment or sadness or fear, you are intoxicated and you're going to then behave in a way you would never consciously choose and hurt someone else.
Mm.
And it doesn't feel like it's a big deal when we hurt someone else. Guess who else feels that way? The person who hurt you.
Yep.
So
Yep.
you have to have the ability to accept this massive ball of humility. That's
Yeah.
like, you know what? I'm not different than my enemy.
Right.
Even if their sin was maybe more severe by my object or my value system,
Mm-hmm.
I still have done the exact same thing mechanistically. I had an
Yeah.
emotion because a belief was validated and I behaved emotionally speaking, right? I behaved in an emotionally triggered way,
Right.
which hurt someone else. So yeah, if we can really not only overcome victimhood, but come to a place where you can stand on a stage and say, oh yeah, all these things happen to me in my life, but thank God.
Mm. Yeah.
And here's what I learned. And I love that person still. Like I have so much trauma and things and all that stuff. Doesn't matter. I'm not that person anymore. And
Yeah.
I love all the people that hurt me in the past.
Yeah.
Because we're all the same.
Yeah. If this could really catch fire, and that's my hope, we need to normalize these conversations. We need to normalize conversations about why am I the way that I am, instead of just blanketly accepting that.
Yeah.
But imagine how the world would be a better place. Hurt people. I mean, that's how the world works. And again, it's that getting yourself outside of the victim mentality and owning what you do, the chaos that ensues. At some point, the cycle has to be broken. Otherwise, we're just going to keep on hurting people who are going to keep on hurting people. And so there's something very real to the effect of, it may not be your fault.
No, but it's your responsibility.
Yeah. I mean, we weren't taught how to regulate our emotions. We weren't taught about all of these things. It's upsetting that I know so much about parallelograms from school, but I know so little about day-to-day life and how to handle my emotions.
Yeah.
But it's not your fault, but it becomes your responsibility. And, just really having that mindset of it ends with me. I'm not going to pass this on to my kids. I'm not going to, I'm going to break this generational thing that has come through the past, and I'm going to say it ends with me.
I like
the work you're doing is incredible.
Thank you. I like to think of it as like enough.
Yeah.
Like just that word, enough.
Yeah.
You're fighting with your wife every day, enough.
Yeah.
You're mean to your kids. You can't stop, all the things that you currently know. If I were to say, be on your best behavior, what would you do? And if you would do something different, then those are the behaviors that you need to change.
Bingo.
And more importantly, find out why you do them. Find the belief behind them. Find the emotion behind them and recognize, be objective about your emotions. They don't have to be scary. They don't have to be, you're not weak if you talk about them. You're actually tough as nails if you talk about them. You're like, oh yeah, there's something chemically happening in my body. I'm going to call it fear. I'm going to call it embarrassment. But make sure you know what it really is. And I really want people to understand that emotional intelligence is so important, but it's not enough. We really have to get control over our emotional state 100%, because what controls how you feel controls you. So do you want to be in control of you? I know you don't want me in control of you or your boss or your wife or your husband in control of you all the way. Right. You want to be in control of you. You want to be the leader of your own life. And your emotional state dictates the quality of your life. I don't think that is arguable. Your emotional state totally dictates the quality of your life. You could have $3 billion in your bank account right now, but if you're not happy, does it really matter? If you live in a tent on the beach with no money and you're so happy, who's got a better quality of life? So I really want people to understand, if you're going through life frustrated, discontent, resentful, thinking about things that have happened to you or have been said to you over and over again in your head, I call that a mental obsession. That mental obsession actually allows you to maintain the same emotional state. Because if you weren't thinking the thought, you wouldn't make the chemical.
Sure.
And then also when you become addicted to chemistry, sometimes that chemistry is made on its own because your body's so used to it. When my people start training with me, the first few weeks, they start feeling that huge shift in their life, probably before that even, the first week, there should be a massive change. But in the next few weeks, they're like, whoa, I'm waking up. I'm not having the same emotions that I used to have. I'm not experiencing things in any way that I used to. And it's amazing. But I do find that I'm thinking these thoughts. I'm like, yes, your body is trying to get you to make that same chemistry.
Yep.
It's not because it's your enemy. It's because you trained it.
Yeah. It's doing what it's trained to do.
Yeah. It's like getting mad at your dog for jumping on your bed the day after you decided to not let it jump on your bed.
Yep. Got to be consistent, right?
For sure.
We're learning that the hard way with our kids.
Yes, I bet. Yeah.
Yeah. If you let it slide once and you can't get on to them the next time because that's on you. So,
right.
Yeah. So, what is it that we're trying to pinpoint here? Well, it's the areas that and odds are everyone knows. Like when we're talking about this, something comes to mind.
Yeah.
It's when I fly off the handle. It's when I have an argument with my wife. It's anytime emotions are driving your actions in a negative way.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about here. And so being aware of it is kind of step one.
Yeah.
Calling it what it is step one. But like you said, emotional intelligence is not enough. If nothing changes, nothing changes, right? And so until what I love that you're doing as part of the process is getting to the root cause of it. A lot of times, we may start reading a book or something, and I'll talk about that in a minute with yours, but we start reading a book and we stop at that part because we're like, okay, well, that's really cool. All right, I'm realizing now that I'm having some of these behaviors and that it's probably emotional insobriety.
Yeah.
The end.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, then now that just leads you to become more frustrated with yourself, leads you to the place of shame and blame. But doing the work to get to it's really the hard work to get to the root of the problem, to me, seems like the crucial step.
Yeah.
Because realizing where that wound lies to start with that causes all of this, if you don't identify the wound, it can't heal.
Right. And really, most of the time, our wounds are misinterpretations from a child.
Yeah. And, in a lot of a lot of times you get stuck there. I was talking to somebody actually just today about a conversation that I had with a baseball coach. And it happened when I was 16, 17 years old. And it was an interaction we had, and it ended up making me quit baseball. Something I absolutely loved because of the way he treated me after this interaction. And it's as real as it was then.
Yes.
When I think about everything that happened, it's like I'm there.
Wow.
And, being able to unpack that, and now I can talk about it with, understanding, and it doesn't make me teary eyed like it used to.
Yeah.
But that was a big wound in my life that I did not realize until later on. And it was causing me to have these feelings of, I'm not good enough. Just kind of being transparent here.
Yeah.
I wasn't good enough to play baseball for this guy. And so therefore I'm not good enough at all. And so I dealt with these issues all through life. And I would wonder why I would get so defensive when, I would read things my wife would say in a way that she didn't even mean for them to, to come across. She'd be like, hey, what are we going to do with the kids this weekend? And I would read that as, you're not doing enough with the kids, so how are we going to fix that?
Nailed it.
We read too much into things because we're automatically on the defense.
Yeah.
And the picture I'm painting is how freeing it is to be able to rid yourself of some of that and to be able to overcome those chemicals.
Yeah. And even get to another place where you could see that coach in the future and give him a big hug.
Yep.
Because you just totally get why he did what he did, because of the same way you snap at your wife is what he was doing to you.
Yep.
It's his own personal thing, right? You nailed that, Chad. I feel like we should talk every week and just keep doing this.
This is fun. Well, and I get it because I've lived it. And I wish I'd known you years ago. We could have done this a lot sooner, but
right.
But I love it. Now, before we came on, you talked about how important your faith is. And I want to just give you an opportunity to share about that a little bit. What role has your faith played in the journey that you're going through currently?
Oh my gosh, that's such a big question. I would say it was that faith that allowed me to practice fearlessness.
Wow.
So when I really think about, even like, biblical things like, cast your burden onto me.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, that's a command.
Yeah.
That's not a request or a, maybe you should. It's like, no, do it. Because when you don't do that, I think what he's saying is when you're in an emotional state that's intoxicated and you're in fear, you're not trusting in me, or you're not trusting in the situation, then you're going to make you're going to victimize someone.
Yep.
You're going to be part of the problem. And so it really helped me become fearless and taking that literally as a command. If there's ever something in your life that's not going your way, the way you think it should, humble it up. I always say this to people, doesn't matter if you are somebody of faith or not. It's if you get arrogant enough, if you turn away from something greater than yourself enough, you will be humbled. And it's sometimes a little smack in the butt. Like it's hard sometimes. And it's there not to punish you. It's not to be punished. And you could even think of that as natural law. It's not to be punished. It's just what happens next.
Yeah.
It's the consequence.
Yep.
Yeah. But having that, and I turned away from God my whole life. I was like, nope, not doing that. I was dragged to church for every Sunday, Catholic, it was just something that I really resented and avoided. And I think when I had my daughter, I was like, oh, I kind of get it now. I get what unconditional love is.
Yeah.
I didn't believe there could be anything that loved me like that. And then I still didn't really believe that there was a thing or a God or anything like that, but I believed in something else. And then over time, I feel like it was almost like just like a whispering that was just like, hey, you got to think like this, or you got to do this. And it wasn't coming from a place that I had heard before. And that's what really, my faith was created because it was proven to me. It was just over and over again. And the more I relied on it, the farther I could go. And so I got emotionally sober before I had full faith, but I wasn't all the way in a place of, I would consider true sobriety, where I believe in myself and I believe that I'm unassailable to such an extent, and until I included a spiritual component for sure. Yeah.
Well, we're spiritual beings. And one of the things that I like to say is that I'm, in my coaching, I'm helping men thrive body, mind, and soul.
Yeah.
If we isolate one of those things, we're not going to be satisfied. If we're successful in two of those things, but neglecting another, we're not going to be satisfied. Yeah. It's only when we realize how they go together. And a lot of times it's that spiritual component that we leave out. So it's just really cool to hear you talk about that and how, you kind of found the completeness of it all with your aspect of faith. I can't tell you how many times where I've been like, Lord, I don't know what to do right now. And you just kind of get that little whisper, and you do it and you're like, oh, wow, that was the right thing to do. And that builds your faith, every little step that, you're obedient, you hear the whisper, you're obedient, that builds your faith and builds your faith and builds your faith. And there have been times where I would go into like a counseling session or something and I'd be like, God, I had no idea how to handle this. You're going to really have to show up because it's just a messy thing. And, I would feel very inadequate, very unprepared, but the words that would just pour out of me would be like, wow, that's exactly what they needed. And I can't take credit for that. It's just the Lord speaking through us. And so I get that. I see what you're saying. And it's the best feeling in the world, being in the middle of God's will, pursuing your purpose and doing it, as a humble servant. So I wanted to give you a chance to talk about how people can enter into your world.
Of course.
You're so talented, have so many gifts to offer, and a lot of different avenues through which people can find you. So
the easiest way to connect with me is just to fully connect with me. Send me a message.
Okay.
Andrea@liftedacademy.com. And I will email you back. I am like a open heart. And there's so many things that you mentioned today, Chad, where I'm like, man, I wish I had another hour with you just to talk to you about what happened with your baseball coach and how old were you? And was that the first time that happened? There's so many things that you can go so much further with that. And I want you all to think about being the leaders of your life. You don't need to be a CEO or a captain of a team to be a leader.
Yeah.
We need leaders more than ever because there's so much offendability and hysteria and blame and shaming and canceling. Oh my gosh. And I want to just drench the world with beautiful humility and an understanding that humility is not about self-deprecation. It's about we're all the same. We all need help sometimes. We all make mistakes, and we make mistakes because of the same mechanism.
Right. Yeah, I'm not much different than you. You're not much different than me. So who am I to say I'm better than you?
Right.
Who am I to say I'm better than anybody?
Or worse.
Yeah, right. Yeah, works both ways.
Yeah.
So, and you have a book that's out.
I sure
you wanted
do.
to mention that as well.
Yeah. My book is The You You've Never Met, and it is how to stop pain and chaos in in all your relationships, right? By sobering up emotionally speaking. So a lot of people, when they hear the word sobriety, they always think, oh no, she's going to make me quit drinking. And it's really, it's not about that. That would probably be something that you choose to stop doing.
Right.
Once you get control of your emotional state, because you're going to have so much more self-esteem and self-respect and self-reverence that you wouldn't want to put poisonous flammable liquid in your body. But other than that, I mean, and no judgment, by the way, I've drank way too much in my life. So hello, we're all the same. So yeah, no judgment. But I want people to understand that, my book is there to guide you. It's like a textbook. It's not a read where you're going to read it all in one weekend. Maybe it's really a process. And I love to help people hold their hands through it. My husband and I have tons of curriculum in our Lifted Academy programs to help you become the leader of your life, to help you become limitless, to be unassailable. And I know that might seem impossible right this moment, but trust me, I've done it. You can do it. Because like I said, I was a nightmare. I was stubborn too. I was stubborn. So the harder the case, bring it to me.
And I'll put links to all that in the show notes as well.
Great.
But what a treasure you are. You guys check her out. You guys do masterminds occasionally and, free webinars and that sort of thing. So, putting out all kind of value, just really trying to help, really trying to heal, and couldn't agree with you more. So thank you so much, Dr. V, for joining us today. Thank you. Thank you for listening to the RevRx podcast. We hope you enjoyed what you heard today, and if so, we'd love it if you would hit that subscribe button so that you'll never miss a new episode from us. Also, feel free to leave us reviews and comments, as we'd love to hear from you. Be blessed and be the very best you.